Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannick, and you can get more information about this podcast and how to support us at our website, hopefortheanimalspodcast.org. And I'd also like to encourage you to sign up on Compassionate Living's e-news list. That way you'll get reminders about our latest podcast episodes, information about our educational events, and more. You can go to compassionate-living.org and sign up. You can find all these links in our show notes. Okay, we are back in action after a bit of a break. I had a little hibernation hiatus for the winter. I hope you are surviving and enjoying the dark season. So, I now live in Eugene, Oregon. I've been here a full year. We moved here in January of last year. And a couple of weeks ago, the buzz was that there was an ice storm coming. And Kojin and I, my husband and I are from the Bay Area of California, and we were like, "Oh, what the heck is an ice storm?" Well, we found out, and for about 6 days, we couldn't leave the house, couldn't even walk down the driveway. Everything was covered in what looked like snow. I mean, just from from looking out the window, it looked like snow, but it was ice, this thick layer of slick ice that I mean, it was just like our driveway was an ice rink. It was crazy. Really beautiful, though, just incredible. We were fine. We're good at staying home. We're fine with it. But it was like, welcome to Oregon. We are not in California anymore. Never experienced anything like that, but we still love it. The natural beauty here is worth it, and it was beautiful. I mean, the pictures I took during that ice storm were incredible. But wow, what an experience! We are not in California anymore. So, Compassionate Living has a packed schedule for this year, and it all starts this month with our Humane Hoax Online Conference coming up on February 24th, 2024. So, it's 2/24/24. This event is through our Humane Hoax Project. Of course, that project is about focusing on humane washing and greenwashing and the marketing and labeling of animal products as being more humane or more ecological than they actually are. If you're listening to this podcast after that date, the conference videos will be on our Compassionate Living YouTube page. But if you can, please join us. Registration is free. This is our fifth annual Humane Hoax Online Conference. I can't believe it that we've been doing this for 5 years. Pretty cool. And we have a fantastic lineup this year, including Renee King Sonnen, the Texas beef rancher's wife who transitioned their ranch into a farmed animal sanctuary called Rowdy Girls Sanctuary. And Renee was on the podcast recently. She's going to tell her story of how, when she was questioning everything about what they were doing to the cows on her ranch, she went through a period where she wanted to do humane farming and slaughter the animals on the ranch, thinking that would be better. But as she has said, and her talk is titled, "There is no right way to do the wrong thing." We will also have Vasile Stanescu presenting on greenwashing and the marketing shift to eco-labeling of meat, dairy, and eggs. Voss will talk about the incredible research that he has done on the topic of animal agriculture's greenwashing, regenerative animal farming, so much more. And he will be our next guest on the podcast, Vasile Stanescu. So be sure to watch for that episode coming out on February 15th. And please join us at the Humane Hoax Online Conference, Saturday, February 24th. I'll have a link to the info and the free registration in the show notes. Before we get into today's interview, I also wanted to share something with you that I've been thinking about, and that is the degree of experience or emotion or suffering that we think animals have or that we afford to animals. I think that all humans, even animal lovers, even vegans, have speciesist tendencies. And speciesism is the false assumption that one species is superior over another. And I think it's sometimes hard for people to see that the degree of suffering that animals can endure is just as bad as a human in the same circumstance, for instance, or could be even worse. I mean, just getting people to acknowledge that animals feel pain and suffer, suffering being a prolonged pain, either physically or emotionally or psychologically. I mean, there's still this archaic belief that fish don't feel pain. And here I'll give a recommendation for the Reason for Vegan series in this podcast. I have 10 short episodes that are focused in on different species of animals and their experiences. And I have two that are dedicated to fish, where I talk about the overwhelming scientific evidence that not only do fish feel pain, but they have emotion and individual personalities and complex cognitive abilities. So if you go to the podcast website, there's a drop down menu with categories, and the Reason for Vegan series can be found there. I highly recommend it. But what I'm arguing here is that animals in pain, animals that are suffering, can suffer even more than humans in similar circumstances and under certain conditions. And I don't mean to say that they actually physically hurt more, like the pain that they endure is somehow physiologically more pain, but I do believe that their experience can be more negative or more negatively enhanced than a human in the same circumstance. And I heard a great example of this on the Sentientism podcast recently. The thought experiment is someone getting a dental procedure. And for a human, that can be very painful. But we understand that it's for our own good, that our teeth will be healthier afterward, that the pain will be temporary, right? We have all this context around it. All of that puts the pain in perspective, and it helps our brain to deal with the pain better. A cow or a pig or a dog can't understand all those nuances, right? They just feel the pain and experience the fear of the situation. They have no idea how long it's going to last. They don't know why it's happening. So their experience of the pain, I believe, could be enhanced, could be much worse than the human in the same situation. And this, of course, applies to farmed animals in animal agriculture and all the procedures and confinement and monotony that they face, that they endure. I think most people feel that animals, especially farmed animals, don't experience their horrible circumstances as deeply as a human would, right? But I would argue that in some instances, perhaps in most, it's even worse for them because of this added psychological enhancement. And I also think that many would agree if we could just see past our speciest worldview and know that animals have the same capacity for sensation and emotion that we do, yet lacking the same language, they don't know the details of their circumstance. So the fear and pain can be enhanced. I want us to feel more comfortable speaking about animals in this way and get past our speciesist blinders and our speciesist lens. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they can suffer and feel pain on a different level, on a deeper level in some circumstances. But there is something that we all can do to help alleviate their suffering. And that's why we're here today to learn about living a vegan life and communicating about compassion and animals. And today's interview with journalist Nina Jackel will help us do just that. Compassionate news media that is sympathetic to animals is so critical. So I'm really happy to feature a passionate voice for animals in the media today. I hope you enjoy this interview. Okay, I am happy to introduce Nina Jackel. She is a journalist and activist known for affecting change for animals around the world through her nonprofit media organization that she founded called Lady Freethinker. Nina leads numerous divisions at the organization that expose cruel and illegal activities through undercover operations, targeted education to change outdated cultural norms, and galvanizing ordinary citizens to make a difference by signing petitions for government and law enforcement. Welcome to the podcast, Nina.
Hi, Hope. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's great to talk to you. I appreciate Lady Freethinker. You've done some wonderful, wonderful work. I get your alerts, and also you were very kind to do a review, an interview with me, and review of my book back in the spring of 2023 for my book that came out, The Humane Hoax. So thank you so much for that.
Much deserved. You're welcome.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And so we like to start just kind of to get to know you, and we want to know why and when did you go vegan?
So, my journey started at the age of 12. I had a little dog named Peggy who was my best friend in the whole world. I think a lot of vegan stories probably start this way. And I remember one day just lying with her, looking into her eyes, and seeing this depth of emotion and intelligence. And when I started to think about her in pain, it literally made me hurt inside. And
Mm, mm,
um it bothered me so much. I started thinking about that same sentience in other animals, and I realized that day that if I wouldn't want to see suffering in this little dog's eyes, I really didn't want to cause suffering for any other animal. I did not eat any meat after that day. At that time, I did not understand the cruelty in dairy and egg industry, so I started vegetarian. And then a little over a decade ago, I started becoming aware of these investigations from other fantastic nonprofits into dairy farms, especially seeing the way that the baby calves were ripped from their mothers, some of the illnesses present on those farms, the cages that the egg-laying hens were forced to live in. Not that cage-free is better, as we know. Those images I saw at the time were of those tight little cages where they couldn't spread their wings. And it just broke my heart. And I began to realize that these industries were not as benevolent as I thought. I was under the impression that, oh, well, the cow just gives milk and it's fine and they're happy. And I was a cheese addict, so I didn't really want to face the truth, to be honest.
yeah.
Cheese is addictive. But at that time I realized that I was not living the compassionate life that I thought I was with my vegetarian diet, and I started transitioning to vegan. Now cheese is disgusting to me, and I never thought that would happen, but it does. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it was a quick vegetarian shift followed by a very long road to veganism.
Hmm. And you were 12 when you made that decision?
I was 12. I
Wow,
was
that's so young. That's amazing. I was 16, so a little bit older, but still
still young.
it shows the kind of inherent compassion that kids have, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I love when I see those videos of children who have just learned that the food on their plate came from, a lamb or a pig, and the disgust. And that's something that really is so natural for young children. And I think there's a reason that, we inherently, are compassionate beings who have empathy for other animals. And when you're young, you haven't really learned to block that yet, I suppose, in
Yeah.
the way that we
Yeah.
do when we're older.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Nina, I'd love to hear about how you created your organization, Lady Freethinker. You have kind of a journalist background. You went vegan and you wanted to kind of maybe bring these worlds together, I'm assuming. How did you create Lady Freethinker?
Yeah, so I didn't realize I was starting a nonprofit organization. I started a blog. As a journalist, I was taking on assignments that weren't necessarily, covering the topics that I cared about most. I was actually focused in nutrition and that, because plant-based food is so much healthier than animal products, it was easy to, naturally promote that lifestyle. But I really wanted to do more, and I wanted a space where I could talk about, the ethics of living, not just for animals, but a place where I could talk about the issues that really mattered to me most. And the more I started blogging, the more I realized that animals were just what I cared about speaking on more than anything. And the animals really needed my voice. The animals need human voices to speak for them because although they can communicate very well, they don't have platforms.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they need us to provide that for them. And the more I wrote, the more I learned, the more atrocities I saw, the more interested I became in doing more and more and more. And then at one point, I realized that I wanted to do more than just have a blog. And so I filed for 501(c)(3) status, nonprofit organization, mainly a nonprofit media organization. And that was in 2015 when Lady Freethinker officially became a nonprofit organization.
Okay. And so being a journalist and a writer, you can kind of see the importance or the power in media. And on your website, you say that media has the power to illuminate, educate, and influence. Talk about the importance of media in animal rights.
Media is essential in changing people's perceptions of animals, in exposing the hidden atrocities that happen to animals, and in creating systemic change, individual change, all of those things. Because if people aren't aware of what's happening, then they can't do anything about it. And media is a way to reach a wide audience and inform them on topics that they otherwise would know nothing about. So it's essential. Mainstream media, obviously is the big one that has a wider audience by default, but social media can have the same impact. And sometimes, a viral video or image on social media can reach an even larger audience than mainstream. So, any form of media that puts issues in front of people, that puts injustices in front of people so that they can no longer be ignored, is crucial in creating real change.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's why I started a podcast.
Mhm.
It's so great that now we have the power as individuals, as just regular citizens, to form media, to create media like blogs, like you started with the blog, and like I'm doing this podcast.
Mhm.
We now have that power through the internet, through computers, all of that, to be able to be part of the conversation. And it's so empowering, but frustrating sometimes at the same time because it's hard to get these very important issues of the animals, of the environment into the larger platforms or into the bigger voices,
Right.
the actual mainstream medias or the big influencers on YouTube or whatever. So I don't know if you have any thoughts or anything on how we can grow. I know it's tough and there's no one answer, but
If I knew the secret,
yeah.
I don't know that there's a one size fits all for that, but
Right,
I
right.
truly believe in dedication and perseverance, and you never quite know what is going to resonate. So I say just keep at it, keep posting, keep sharing, keep pitching mainstream media. Most press releases don't get picked up, but some do, and that can be a huge boost. The more you post, and the more you think about the audience who is receiving that post and make it as compelling as possible to them, the better your chances that your information will be shared. Imagery, hugely important, hugely important. For Lady Freethinker posts and any type of releases, I try to use images that show the animal's eyes, expression, emotion. The more you can get people to emotionally connect to an animal, the more response you will get, in my experience. Use simple language. I know we all want to sound smart, but when you use terminology that people don't really understand, it just gets skipped over. So use very clear, simple language. Make your point right up front, right at the top. Don't bury it under background information. Say what you want to say concisely, boldly, and in language that people understand, and with a great image. And then just keep trying. That's my best advice.
That's really, really great advice. I love that, to really emotionally connect with the audience.
Mhm.
It's so important. And doing that through, imagery and animals, the eyes. And I
Yes.
love that. Yeah, it's so, so important. The great, great advice. I've actually seen, though, a shift in media. There is more sympathy for animals. There is more emphasis on the environmental problems. Not enough, of course, but certainly a huge, huge improvement. Being a media consumer for 40 years,
Mhm.
I've certainly seen a big shift. So that's positive. Of course, we need it more and faster, but there certainly has been a bit of a shift. Yeah.
We have come so far, and we've seen front page news in the New York Times about farmed animal rescues, and or conditions on chicken farms, and those things are making mainstream news when they never would have, a decade ago.
Yeah.
So yes, there has been tremendous progress. Yes, we need more, but I really am delighted to see that mainstream media is shifting toward compassion, and I do expect that to continue as well.
So tell us about what Lady Freethinker does. What do you do specifically to get the message out?
Lady Freethinker is dedicated to exposing animal cruelty to as wide an audience as possible. Our strategy is to get the word out, get people's attention, and call for change. And that's both policy change, as well as individual lifestyle changes. We publish news and petitions daily. We'll publish investigations from animal protection organizations, or even sometimes just happy rescue stories, because you can't just post nothing but bad news. And we publish petitions as an awareness raising tool and a change tool when there's an egregious case of animal abuse, or perhaps a new bill that could potentially help better protect animals. We publish petitions and gather signatures to send to the decision maker to urge them to take action. Beyond that, we also do independent investigations globally. Right now, we've been looking into animal cruelty on social media. There's some horrendous activity, and obviously it's a massive problem, so it's a fairly big campaign. And we physically send investigators to animal facilities around the world to document what's happening, and then expose it through our own platform as well as through mainstream media when possible.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been hearing about how on social media people will actually put animals in dangerous situations and frame it as like a rescue, just to get a lot of media hits on their
Yeah,
YouTube page or whatever.
right.
Do you know about that, or is that something?
Yeah. Fake rescues are one of the primary forms of animal torture on social media right
My
now.
God.
It comes in various formats. Sometimes you'll see a small animal put in the grip of a predatory animal, such as a python, or an eagle that is obviously captive as well. The
Mm.
snake is sort of forced on this animal. The eagle's wings are clipped, and
Oh,
they're
wow.
sort of sicked on this prey animal, which could be anything from a chicken or a duck to a puppy or a kitten. And then at the last minute, the supposed rescuer rushes in and saves the animal. those fake rescue videos were among the first forms of animal torture that we started exposing and reporting to social media platforms. Many have been removed, and in some ways, there has been success in that campaign as YouTube did explicitly ban fake animal rescues following these exposés. However, the supposed rescuers are also now coming up with newer and sneakier ways to stage these
Right, to
videos
make it look real.
to make it harder to prove
Right.
as fake.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll see them and you know that it's fake because there's something in your brain that says that's not right. There's something wrong with this situation. But then the problem becomes, how do you prove that, and how do you show social media platforms how to discern a real rescue video from a fake rescue video? And there are certain cues that we watch for. First and foremost, any legitimate rescuer will have a name, an address. They'll show themselves. They'll actually show progression of the rescue. Like they won't just show the animal hanging from a tree by a rope, which, by the way, is very rare to actually stumble upon in real life in the first
Yeah.
place. But
Right.
but then, they would show the aftermath, the dog later, the dog recovering
Yeah.
and all that. But, when we see these pages that are basically anonymous, posting video after video of an animal in such a precarious situation that the odds of finding it are astronomically low, and
Right.
yet you
Like
can find
a
it every
kitten with a
day.
python. Where
Yeah,
what yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Uh,
Um, so, our task is not just to track those videos, which we do, but also to create systemized ways of identifying them, because there's no other way to remove them. From the social media platforms perspective, I mean, they're making money from the content on their site, so they're not
yeah.
super
Yeah.
compelled to remove it. you
Yeah.
know, and what we don't want them to do is start removing investigative videos of animal cruelty like the ones that we're doing, like the ones that other animal protection organizations are doing. And I think that they genuinely don't understand how to tell the difference at this point, which is disturbing in and of itself, but it also shows how important it is, to act not just emotionally when you see these and say this is awful, report it, but also try and figure out, well, what makes this fake? How do I know this is fake? How can I, create guidelines that can be applied to other videos to help platforms determine that they're fake? And some platforms have been more receptive than others at wanting feedback. Right now, Lady Freethinker actually has an active lawsuit against YouTube because they really have failed to communicate as well as to remove egregious content that has been posted, after years of just watching it, feeling helpless and reaching out with petitions, reaching out as part of a coalition of larger organizations called the Social Media Animal Cruelty Coalition, with really no response from them. There was just no other recourse other than take legal action. And so, we do have an active lawsuit, and
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
hopeful that things will change, but as with any large systems, they don't change overnight.
right. Well, such good work. I mean, that's amazing that that coalition is doing that work and that you're doing that lawsuit. I think it's certainly something that was not foreseen that would be an outcome of social media. There's been so
Right.
many of those, right? Negative outcomes that
Right.
just could not be foreseen. And this is certainly one of them. And you're right. If they shut down just all possible fake animal rescues, then a lot of very important focus on animals could be in jeopardy as well with real animal
Mhm.
abuse imagery.
Right.
Yeah. Well, great work there. Really appreciate that. And so your organization works on issues for all species of animals in need,
Mhm.
but you do focus in on farmed animals with some campaigns, and that's of course our focus here at Hope for the Animals. So, would you like to tell us about a few of the campaigns or programs that have focused on farmed animals?
Yeah, so we recently conducted an investigation into live animal markets in New York and New Jersey, where they keep chickens, ducks, rabbits, sometimes goats in really horrendous conditions, just in tiny cages stacked on top of each other, covered in urine and feces, as you can imagine, and then, slaughtered in brutal ways. And
And
we,
can I just
yes.
clarify, are these at an open air market like farmers market, or is it actual indoor locations is my first question. And also, are they sold live for people to slaughter, or are they slaughtered on site?
They're generally slaughtered on site. These are brick and mortar locations. They're not
Okay.
a
Okay.
temporary at farmers markets. These are, actual storefronts.
Okay.
And the animals are taken to the back room and slaughtered to order in most cases. And yeah, I mean just the health concerns are really enough to show how these places should be shut down. I mean, there's blood and feces all over the place, and as we know, zoonotic disease is a huge risk.
Yeah.
um, but beyond that, obviously the conditions are extremely cruel. And this Thanksgiving, we actually partnered with Humane Long Island, who rescued three turkeys from live markets in New Jersey, and we funded the veterinary care for these turkeys. And it's nice to see them free and not killed for the Thanksgiving table. They were not in good shape. A lot of feather loss. One had problems walking, and all those illnesses that are really just sort of widespread, not just in live animal markets, but at any animal farm.
Yeah, I actually did some work when I was with United Poultry Concerns on live animal markets in San Francisco.
Oh.
But these were where it was like an open air, just temporary setup, and they would sell chickens live. Like, they would actually give people
Mm.
chickens. They were in plastic bags, but they
Oh,
were alive,
oh my gosh.
turned upside down in plastic bags for people to take home and slaughter themselves.
Oh,
That was horrific, and was actually shut down by the city, luckily,
good.
eventually.
Fantastic.
Yes,
Great
yeah.
work.
So, but I know those things still exist in places, but this is an indoor kind of place, and so what response have you gotten from the city, from just the investigation?
Um, well, from an awareness perspective, it has been successful. Many people have reached out and said they weren't aware. Even people who live in New York and New Jersey, where these live markets exist, they weren't even aware of them at all. So, from awareness perspective, I'm happy that we were able to open people's eyes to this. From a from a policy perspective, these places unfortunately are still legal, and they still exist. I think it's a long road to getting these places shut down.
Yeah.
Um, and there are many of them. I mean, we visited 17 markets, so this isn't just
Wow.
an
Wow.
isolated
Yeah.
thing. It's a fairly prevalent issue. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and we, are continuing to keep an eye on these and do what we can to urge legislators to take action, because ultimately that's what we really need, is for politicians to step up and say, hey, these places are hazardous to human health. They're cruel, and they're also just nuisances in their neighborhood. We've had people write in and say that they can smell, these facilities from blocks away, and that they really
Ooh.
don't want them in their communities.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, having a slaughterhouse in your community is not ideal. So there are really many reasons to shut these down. And I am hopeful that at some point politicians will start to take action.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think many of us believed that the pandemic was going to be a wake-up call for live animal markets globally, and it seemed like there was temporary caution, and then as with many things, the long-term change just sort of didn't happen, and things
Yeah.
fade away as people forget. But we're
Right.
not giving up. We're not giving
Good.
up.
Yeah, it is so frustrating that, the pandemic was directly connected to wild live animals
Right.
being slaughtered. And was there any change? Anybody cared? Anybody, so frustrating.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
there were a couple of grandiose statements from various officials promising action, and then nothing ever really happened.
Yeah. Uh, well,
All right. That's depressing stuff.
yeah, yeah. But we continue on, and we try to continue to expose these things because, hopefully there will be some change, and people will wake up to it eventually. So at Lady Freethinker, you have campaigns for all animals, like we've talked about. You have campaigns for dogs and cats and horses and all kinds of animals. And so that, I'm sure, brings animal lovers to your site, to your information. But it's likely that some of those people still eat other animals. So you kind of have this unique opportunity to encourage animal lovers, people that are drawn to animals and care about animals, to extend their compassion to farmed animals and actually change their behavior and what they eat. So how can we do that? How can we get people that already care about animals to care about farmed animals and bridge that disconnect?
Right. So many people who are appalled by cruelty to dogs and cats haven't quite contemplated the cruelty that happens in the farming industry. I think often it hasn't been introduced to them, or it's something that maybe makes them uncomfortable even. And it's a tricky situation. And I do believe that when you inform people about cruelty to any species, whether it's dogs, cats, or wild animals, you do have an opportunity to encourage them to extend that compassion to farmed animals as well. And at Lady Freethinker, we do that in an encouraging and gentle way. I don't think you really get very far by pointing fingers and saying, "Well, hey, you should, care about this too. What's wrong with you?"
Sure.
That's not going to really
Yeah.
change a lot of minds. So we do this in a few ways. Firstly, we publish a lot of articles about vegan issues. That's one of the reasons that our the writer interviewed you about the humane hoax, is
Yeah.
to educate our readers on those issues. And we do interview other various people who are in the vegan space who are, inspirational, I believe. And we also post things like recipe ideas for a plant-based Thanksgiving. And we encourage people to try plant-based options as much as possible. Another way that we do it is, so Lady Freethinker has a grant program. And while we don't do a lot of direct rescue as an organization, we do support rescuers who are on the ground saving animals. And it's very important to me to include farmed animal rescuers among those groups that we support. And then we post the stories about these animals and show them as individuals, and show them as victims of bad situations who are now being loved and cared for. And hopefully that helps things click for people who like, oh, I'm so glad that alpaca, that goat, that cow, that turkey, that chicken is so happy now and having such a great life. For example, we recently funded a shelter for two calves who were rescued from a dairy farm by Happy Compromise Farm and Sanctuary in New York. And we posted these adorable videos about them, and they were actually able to reunite these calves with their mother, Tarragon, who they later were able to save. And now all three of them are living together at this sanctuary, and they're just adorable. I mean, you can't look at them and not fall in love.
Aw.
And we've posted on social media, we've posted on the website, we've sent newsletters. just try to show these animals as lovable, adorable creatures, which they are, and hope that resonates with people and makes them think about, what could have happened to these cows and do they want to see that happening to others?
I think so many people are natural animal lovers. It's just another kind of inherent thing like we were talking about that compassion as children. I think people just love animals. It's very inherent in so many people, but farmed animals get just kind of left out of that circle of compassion because it challenges our daily habits, right? Our eating habits. And someone would have to actually change their behavior or their diet to be in line with their ethics, that ethic of care and love for animals, if farmed animals were included in that broader care and compassion. So farmed animals get, separated and othered and ignored, or excuses are made that they're somehow different, right? Uh,
Right.
and this is such a challenge, but I feel that, of course, animal lovers are such a low-hanging fruit, and they have it in their heart to help end the suffering and go vegan. So it is so wonderful that you have that kind of crossover connection so people can see that they aren't different, that they are just as emotional and wonderful and individual as any other animal, any other species. So that's great that you have that ability to bring those people in.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I do agree that it's an opportunity to really change minds of people who already love animals, but just haven't been exposed to or fully comprehended, the reality of what's happening to farmed animals.
Yeah.
I will say, although we steer clear of finger wagging and do show happy stories, I also do think it's important to show the reality of what happens. And many of our news stories do show the abuse and the truth. For example, we just published an article about how chickens and turkeys in slaughterhouses are continuing to endure abuses, even as the USDA does nothing about them. And that's based on a new report from the Animal Welfare Institute showing that things like live birds entering scald tanks and other horrific things are happening at these facilities. And the government that people trust to stop these things from happening really just aren't. I'm hopeful that that combination of exposing the realities of what happens to animals in agriculture paired with the happier stories that show them as loving sentient beings, it is really meant to change hearts.
Well, Nina, it's really been wonderful to talk to you. We are going to wrap up with the last question. What gives you hope for the future?
I have great hope that the future will be a compassionate one for all species. When I see the compassion of people who respond to investigations, to stories of cruelty, and how viscerally people feel for animals. I know that the compassion is there. I know that maybe it's buried under cultural norms, but I've seen so much progress. I've seen so much progress in people's attitudes. I've seen so much progress in media coverage of animal issues. I've seen so much progress in terms of acceptance of foods that are not meat, that in the past might have been, mocked and now are mainstream. I believe that humanity is evolving and that we are evolving for the better. And that better means a world where we treat each other with kindness and respect. And when I say each other, I mean every species. And I believe that we are working toward that world and getting closer to it every day.
Beautifully said. I love it. I hope that you are right. I feel that you are right. I feel it too. Well, Nina, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for all that you do for the animals and for creating Lady Freethinker. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. You can find the links to Lady Freethinker's website and more information in the show notes. Be sure to check them out and learn about what they do. So during my brief hiatus, I was able to get into some of my back burner list, things that aren't so immediate, that they get kind of pushed back. And one of those things was to update the audio quality and a few of the details in my Reason for Vegan series here on this podcast. I have 10 short episodes that make up the Reason for Vegan series. I made them early in the journey of this podcast. So there were some small audio quality issues that bothered me. So I was able to update them and update some of the info as well. But re listening to them, I was reminded of how powerful they are. This series is really great, in depth information on each species of farmed animal, on the environmental impact. I believe there's 2 episodes on the environmental impact, and also 2 episodes on fish, one on the fishing industry and the other on fish themselves, who fish are, their cognitive ability, their personality. And I cite a lot of great science. So if you haven't listened to the Reason for Vegan series, I recommend it. On our website, there is a drop down menu called episodes, and I have some of the podcasts categorized by themes in that menu. And you can find the Reason for Vegan series there. And when you choose that page, you'll see the 10 short episodes. And I really recommend them. Please share them with pre vegans. It's a great way to introduce people to the issues. So check those out. Just a quick reminder, I mentioned it in the beginning. Compassionate Living has our Humane Hoax Online Conference coming up on February 24th. It's free to attend. Please register and join us to learn fascinating, in depth knowledge about greenwashing and humane washing from our expert panel. I'll have a link to the details about that event in the show notes. It's free to attend. Please share that conference information with your networks. I hope to see you there. And for the animals, live vegan.